Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the uh, gastrointestinal physiology. And as you remember, I told you in the first part some introductory fact about the gastrointestinal system. And in that part, I told you that all part of the gastrointestinal system that is a connected tube has a common structure. However, there are some differences, but the overall structure have some similarity. And I told you that one element in the wall of the GI system wall is two layer of a smooth muscle that allow the GI system to move the food across the tube. And these muscles are very important for the function of the GI system. Now, let me to tell you a little bit more about these smooth muscles. Smooth muscles are known for their some characteristic that we cannot see in other smooth muscle in the body. For example, you see that a smooth muscle in the GI system have some oscillation in their resting membrane potential. You remember we told you in the cell physiology and muscle physiology that excitable cells have a baseline resting membrane potential that is not that is generated by the function of different pumps and different channels. And at the same time, we told you that a smooth muscle has a little less repolarized, or I can say in other way, a little depolarized resting membrane potential, while in the nervous system and also in the skeletal muscle, the resting membrane potential is equal about minus 85 to 90, minus 90, but in the smooth muscle, this resting membrane potential is a little depolarized, about 50 to 60, minus 50 to 60. But the difference that we have here between the smooth muscle of the gastrointestinal system and other smooth muscle is that the resting membrane potential do not remain the same and do not remain constant all the time. And it shows some oscillation that is named as slow waves. Therefore, I can say that slow waves are the oscillation that we see in the resting membrane potential. During the resting state, these oscillation do not generate any action potential, just show some upward and downward. But if the smooth muscle are stimulated by anything, such as stretching, such as the stimulation of acetylcholine, a stimulation of parasympathetic nervous system, and several other hormones, particularly chemical content of the food and stretching that it generates, this will increase the amplitude of the slow waves. And as you see, a slow wave will cross the threshold. What will happen then? At the top of this slow wave, some spikes are generated. You see the spikes, and the spikes means that action potential are generated. The number of this action potential is dependent on the magnitude of the stimulation. For example, if the stretch is very soft, the spikes are a little. The number are not very high. But if the stretching is strong, therefore, as you can see, the number of action potential will increase several times. And this could be happened by the hormones or by parasympathetic activity or acetylcholine. And on the other hand, some factor may inhibit the activity of slow waves and make the resting membrane potential a little repolarized. This, or I can say hyperpolarized. And these are particularly the activity of sympathetic nervous system, norepinephrine, that is released by the sympathetic nervous system. And you can see that when the sympathetic nervous system is stimulated, therefore the resting membrane potential will drop, will be hyperpolarized to about minus 70. And as you can see, the magnitude of slow waves are very, very tiny and undetectable, even undetectable. It is very clear that in this hyperpolarized situation, there is no chance for activation and spike generation. And therefore, thereafter, there is no contraction in the smooth muscle. And smooth muscle will lose their basic tone. This is a critical point that you should know about the smooth muscle of the gastrointestinal system wall. And you should know that another point that you should know about all the smooth muscle, including the vessel or including in the gastrointestinal system, a smooth muscle has a continuous contraction force that is named as basal tone. Therefore, they are not completely relaxed. They have a tone. This tone may be increased by increasing the number of spikes. Therefore, contraction will be strengthened. And on the other hand, sometimes by hyperpolarization, this tone will be loose. Therefore, the smooth muscle will be dilated and relaxed. And this is the basic principle of the movement in the GI system. I can say that every part of the GI system, from the esophagus to the stomach to the small intestine, large intestine, when I'm talking about the movement, you should remember what I told you about a smooth muscle. When I tell you that, for example, in the next session, I will tell you about the movement of the gastrointestinal system. When I tell you that, for example, the stomach generate contraction to grind the food inside, you should remember that a smooth muscle are stimulated and the number of spikes are increased. Therefore, the contraction is generated. And when I tell you that, for example, in another part, we have a relaxation for a part of the GI system, you should remember that, okay, this means that hyperpolarization happened and resting membrane potential drop to lower level. Okay, this is the principle that we have about the smooth muscle electrical activity. Slow waves that are generated in the smooth muscle of the GI system has not enough intensity to generate action potential themselves. I told you normally, unless the time that they are stimulated by some external factor. Originally, they have at the resting situation, they have about 5 to 15 millivolt of magnitude and intensity. Therefore, you can see that they are not generate any contraction. You may ask me, what is the reason for this oscillation? This oscillation in the electrical activity is being generated and spread out by some cells that lies between the smooth muscle, and these cells are named as interstitial cell of Kajal. And these cells generate the action potentials, generate the slow waves, and this slow wave will be distributed in all smooth muscle. Just like the SA node that we have in the heart muscles. The next question, if their slow wave generate any contraction, I told you that no, normally and generally they do not generate any contraction, except there are some exceptions. For example, perhaps in the stomach, some of these slow wave generate some contraction, but generally we say that a slow wave do not stimulate and initiate contraction, but just they potentiate the chance for contraction in the smooth muscle. But when the smooth muscle reached the threshold, or when the magnitude of a slow wave was increased and reached the threshold to generate action potential, then we have the spikes. You see that spikes or the action potential are generated by calcium-sodium channels. These channels are not as fast as the sodium voltage-gated sodium channel that we see in the skeletal muscle or in the nervous system. They are much more slower in the opening and their closure. In this slide, the factor that stimulate the slow waves magnitude and generate action potential, such as stretching of muscle, stimulation by acetylcholine, stimulation by parasympathetic nervous system, and stimulation by gastrointestinal hormone, are listed. I told you about them. And on the other hand, norepinephrine and epinephrine and stimulation of sympathetic nervous system that are able to inhibit and hyperpolarize the electrical activity of a smooth muscle are listed here. These are important for you. And I will ask you about the slow waves. Let me show you this as a start slide. And this start slide show you that you should know the mechanism, the slow wave, the physiology of a slow wave, which factors stimulate them and make them strong enough to generate action potential and contraction, and on the other hand, which factor inhibit them and make the smooth muscle less susceptible to contraction. Okay, now by this point, I told you about some general aspect of the gastrointestinal system. Now I'm going to open another subject, and this subject is the control of the gastrointestinal system. You remember in the first part I told you, when we are talking about gastrointestinal system, we cannot imagine a system that has no control, and GI system should have some additional control system to regulate the function of the GI system and the timings of secretion, timing of contraction, the process of absorption, the process of digestion. These mechanisms that we see in the GI system are sometimes exclusive for the GI system. Sometimes there are some connection with the nervous system. Therefore, here I'm going to discuss about the control mechanism that we have in the GI system. And one of these control systems that we have in the GI system is nervous system. You should know that I'm not going to tell you about nervous system, central nervous system. No. Autonomic nervous system in the brain, and also a very unique nervous system that we have in the GI system itself, and it is named as enteric nervous system. Therefore, collectively, one branch of the regulation of the GI system is nervous system, that is composed of two parts. One part is the enteric nervous system, and another is autonomic nervous system. And there are some other regulatory mechanism that we will discuss about. As I told you, the nervous system, enteric nervous system, is a unique network of neurons that are connected to each other, and give the GI system a very simple type of network to connect with each other and generate some local responses independent of the activity of the brain. I mean that if you disconnect the whole connection with the central nervous system, still stomach is able to contract in response to stretch, is still able to release hormones. Therefore, this is named as enteric nervous system, very simple type of brain function. ENS is composed of two nerve plexus. You remember in the first part I told you that we have a submucosal nerve plexus that was located between the submucosal layer, and this network is responsible for regulation of gland and stomach's muscle in the mucosa. In fact, they are mostly regulate secretions of the glands, and those muscles that we found in the, I told you they were named as muscularis mucosa. I told you that there are some isolated muscle that when contracted they are able to change the foldings. Another network of enteric nervous system is named as meandric nerve plexus, and this part is located between the smooth muscle, circular and longitudinal smooth muscle, and this meandric nerve plexus are responsible for regulation of the GI activity, the smooth muscle contractility. But they are independent. Remember, I told you, they are independent of the central nervous system. These enteric nervous system are mostly responsible for local regulation of movement and gland activity. Segmentation and peristaltis that we see in different parts of the GI system are generated by these enteric nervous system and the reflex arcs that are generated locally. This system, however, they are independent, but they have connection with the central nervous system, and therefore they are able to generate even long arc reflexes. I mean that, for example, the stomach can affect the activity of its intestine by using the central nervous system. This figure and some other figure that I will show you what I mean by meandric and submucosal network. As you see, meandric network that you can see here is some connected neurons that are connected with each other in the muscle layer, and the submucosal layer at the submucosal layer, submucosal plexus at the submucosal layer. And as you see, they are receiving information from the receptors that I am showing you here. These receptors will sense and will receive the information and send back signals to the GI system. These receptors that you see here receive the information and send the information to the submucosal plexus or meandric plexus. Please pay attention. These part are the afferent fiber, not efferent fiber, not afferent fibers. I correct myself. And these are receptors. Okay, and then this network generate the response, and by these efferent endings, the response will be generated. For example, a secretion will be stimulated, or a secretion will be inhibited, or a contraction will be initiated or inhibited. These are generated by ENS or enteric nervous system. At the same time, you see that sensory neurons also send a signal, a copy of the signal to the brain. And this sending the information also to the brain allow the enteric nervous system to be synchronized with the autonomic nervous system. Okay. In this slide, you see the function of the meandric plexus that I told you. It increases the tonic contraction or tone of the gut wall. Someone may ask me, what is the tone? I told you that smooth muscles are not totally relaxed. They have a basic contraction all the time. This is named as tone. Sometimes this tone will be increased, sometimes will be decreased. And the meandric nervous system, meandric plexus is responsible for regulation of this tone. On the other hand, meandric plexus also increase the rhythmic contraction that we have in the smooth muscle. It slightly increase the rate of the rhythm of contraction and increase the velocity of conduction of excitatory wave along the gut wall. This is another figure that I showed you before, and you see the meandric plexus, submucosal plexus. These are the receptors, and these are the efferent from the network that convey the response, and this is the sending the information to the brain that I told you. And in this system, now the sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system will help the enteric nervous system to work. Remember, however, I told you that gastrointestinal system has some connection with the brain. It do not mean that these neurons and these information will be sent to the conscious part of the brain. No, all the information will be sent to the unconscious or autonomic part of the brain. And therefore, we are not aware of what is happening inside our stomach, however, or intestine. However, we sense and we receive information. Our brain receive information from these viscera, but they are unconscious, and all the reflexes will be generated and conveyed by the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system. In the enteric nervous system, there are lots of neurotransmitters that are being released from acetylcholine and norepinephrine that I told you. They are released from the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. But there are several other neurotransmitters such as adenosine, serotonin, dopamine, cholecystokinin, substance B, VIP, somatostatin, enkephalin, bombesin. And then you see that it shows that the type of neurons that we have in the GI system are completely heterogeneous. They are not just one type of neuron. There are several neurons, and therefore they have several functions. For example, the neurons that release the VIP are responsible for relaxation of a smooth muscle. Those that are releasing the dopamine and serotonin stimulate the contraction. And this shows how much the complexity is about we have about the enteric nervous system and also autonomic nervous system. When nervous system, as a reminder, I am talking about the regulatory mechanism that are involved in the regulation of GI system. And I told you one branch of this regulatory mechanism is a nervous system, and that nervous system is composed of two parts. One is the enteric nervous system and another autonomic nervous system. By function of these two networks, GI system is able to generate different type of reflexes. You know, reflexes in the last semester, you remember we told you that nervous system is working. Most of the function of nervous system is working as a reflex. A reflex receives the information unconsciously respond to this information. And in the gastrointestinal system, reflex is the basic part of the regulatory mechanism. Some reflexes are generated totally by enteric nervous system. I mean that there is no need for the sympathetic or parasympathetic activity and innervation. These are the reflexes that are local. For example, when you swallow a piece of food into your esophagus, the esophagus will be stretched. And at the same time and same place, the contraction will happen to push down the food to the distal part. This contraction is generated by enteric nervous system, and it is a reflex. Or when food enters the stomach, immediately the stomach will start to release acid and some other fluids to make this food a little diluted and liquid. This is a reflex, local reflex, that is generated by enteric nervous system. Some reflexes in the GI system is not possible just by enteric nervous system, because enteric nervous system from one part is not connected to another part. Therefore, they need the central nervous system, and for example, paravertebral sympathetic ganglia. These are reflexes that connect two parts of the GI system that are away from each other. For example, let me to bring you three examples. One is gastrocolic reflex. The name is very clear, gastrocolic. It means that the stomach will affect the activity of the colon. And all of us are familiar with this gastrocolic reflex. It is sometimes named as breakfast reflex. It means that after a night of fasting, when we are waking up, and in the morning, when we eat breakfast, the stomach will be stretched. The stomach was emptied during the nighttime fasting, and now by breakfast, it will be stretched. When it is stretched, a stomach, regardless of the local reflexes that generate, such as secretion of acid, contraction of stomach, and other reflexes, at the same time, a stomach also sends information to the paravertebral ganglia, and by using autonomic nervous system, send back a response to the colon. In fact, gastrocolon reflex is generated. A stomach will send information to colon and stimulate its activity. What will happen then? About 20 to 30 minutes after eating breakfast, a reflex of defecation will be started. And it is very common for everybody that after breakfast, the sense of defecation will come. This is because the effect of stomach on the colon, and it is generated by the paravertebral ganglia and autonomic nervous system. I mean that enteric nervous system is not able to generate this. Another reflex that I can name is enterogastric. When food exit from the stomach into the duodenum, the duodenum will be stretched. The duodenum is the first part of the small intestine. When the duodenum is stretched, it will send back one information to the gastric muscle and relax them or decrease their activity. In a simple word, I can say that intestine is talking with the stomach and say, please wait a little to allow me to send out this load and then send another load. This is named, for this reason, the name is clear, enterogastric, and it is mainly it is inhibitory. Another reflex is colonoileal. When the remainder of the food entered the colon and colon is stretched, now colon send back information to intestine and tell the intestine, please stop for a while to let me to manage this load and then send another back. These are reflexes that is not possible by enteral nervous system and use the autonomic nervous system. There are some reflexes that not only autonomic nervous system but also some other area higher than ganglia, such as a spinal cord or brainstem, are also involved. For example, you know that, for example, pain will affect the activity of GI system. We named it as a pain reflex. Pain reflex means when you have a pain, gastric activity will decrease. You see that information comes from the brain, not from the GI system, and this brain activity will affect the activity of the GI system, or the gastric activity that is affected by the smell or sight of the food. When you are hungry and see a food that is very delicious, it stimulates the activity of GI system. This is a reflex that is generated by brainstem or higher centers. Again, it is reflex. I mean that we are not have any control on them. They are completely autonomic, but the center is in the brain. Or the defecation itself. I told you about sense of defecation, but the defecation reflex means some complicated reflexes. For example, a person should figure out when it is possible, and then the sphincter that is under the control of a person should be relaxed. On the other hand, the abdominal muscle should be activated, and then defecation will happen. This is showing that we have different type of reflexes, and these different type of reflexes are generated by different type of connection and reflex arcs. Again, I'm going to tell you that this slide is very important for me. Let me to show you two stars. I mean that I may ask you about the which reflex is generated by enteral nervous system, which reflex is paravertebral ganglia of sympathetic nervous system and autonomic nervous system, which reflexes is generated and initiated in higher center of the brain. And for this reason, this slide is very important for me. Okay. The activity of the GI system is not just only controlled by nervous system. It also, the gastrointestinal system is also able to release several hormones, and these hormones do have activity for regulation of different function of the GI system, from secretion to movement, from absorption, digestion. All these are regulated by the hormones. You may ask me, if we have nervous system, what is the need for hormones? Hormones have even long-lasting effect, and nervous system are not able to have long-lasting effect. On the other hand, these nervous system is working reflexly, and on the other hand, hormones will be complementary factor for the nervous system. For this reason, now we know that gastrointestinal system release a dozen of hormones, and these list is developing every time some other new hormones are also discovered. Here in this slide, I just bring you some example about the hormones that we have in the GI system. main hormones, not all hormones. For example, gastrin, that you see what is the stimulation for the secretion? Presence of food in the stomach, distension of the stomach, and also nervous system stimulate the release of gastrin, and gastrin will stimulate this acid secretion and mucosal growth in the stomach. The cell that releases the gastrin is G cell in the antrum of the gastric mucosa, but also in the duodenum and jejunum also we have some source of the gastrin secretion. Another hormone is cholecystokinin. Again, this hormone is very important. Again, protein, fat, acid that enter the duodenum after passing the stomach will stimulate eye cells in the duodenum, jejunum, and ileum, and they will release the cholecystokinin. Cholecystokinin stimulate pancreatic enzyme secretion. In fact, the duodenum is communicating with the pancreas to stimulate its enzyme secretion to allow the protein and fatty acid and carbohydrate to be digested. You see that this hormone is involved in digestion regulation or bicarbonate secretion by the pancreas. You know that because we have a high acid content in the stomach, therefore cholecystokinin try to neutralize this acid, or gallbladder contraction and secretion of the bile salt into the intestine, or growth of exocrine pancreas cells stimulate their activity. On the other hand, cholecystokinin inhibit gastric emptying, because I told you when the duodenum has high content of food and acid, cholecystokinin transiently inhibit stomach to allow this acid to be neutralized and then stimulate the release of other load. Another hormone is secretin. Again, you see S cell in the duodenum stimulate the pepsin secretion from the stomach, pancreatic bicarbonate secretion, biliary bicarbonate secretion. Some other hormones such as GIP. GIP is released by K cell in the duodenum, stimulate insulin release. Pay attention. GIP stimulate insulin release from the pancreas, and in fact it generates a feed-forward mechanism. In forward of carbohydrate absorption, insulin will be stimulated. Another hormone is motilin, and several, you know that motilin regulate the gastric motility, intestinal motility. They are involved in some kind of movement that I will tell you. They are named as migrating movement, and they are involved. Therefore, I can say that gastrointestinal system is regulated widely with different type of hormones, nervous system, and the combination of these factors will be regulating the GI system. There are several other paracrine factors also that these are also working locally, such as histamine, and all these factors will work to regulate the gastrointestinal system. The time of this file is a little long, therefore let me to finish this part here, and then in the next part we will discuss about the motility of the GI system and how the motility in different is seen in the different part of the GI system, and we will go on. As a summary, in this part I told you about the regulatory mechanism that we have in the GI system, nervous system, endocrine part, paracrine regulation, and bring you some example of the hormones. I do not mean that I told you all the hormones, just a list of hormones, list of most important hormones are shown here. We have tens of other hormones that I did not mention here because we do not have enough time. In next time, I will start to discuss about the motility, some general principle about the motility, and then we will discuss about the motility in different parts separately and one by one. Thank you very much for listening to me and being with me today. I invite you to listen to these items, particularly the slide that I showed you carefully, that I somehow I spoiled that which slide and which part I will be asked in your exam. In next session, we will continue this discussion about the physiology of the GI system by those stuff that I told you. Thank you very much, everybody, and goodbye for now.